All right, Doc. So everybody always asks the question about starting seeds indoors. Can you help us out with that?
Right, there are some great reasons why we would start seeds indoors. Oftentimes it's just for timing, right? We don't want to wait for tomatoes to go all the way to production from a seed in our garden. And often it is also because we can provide the best, most tailored conditions for our seeds, especially our warm season crops that require high germination temperatures to produce and get started well. And of course, it's a little bit of winter therapy. So sometimes we start seeds just because we love doing this in January and February and March when the weather's poor.
Yeah, winter therapy. I like that. Good one. Yeah. So what kind of materials would we need to start those seeds indoors?
Yeah, so we're going to start by deciding on containers that we can seed into.
Okay.
So lots of times what we'll do is start with a small tray where we'll seed things close together and then transplant up. So that's kind of what I have here. This is a small seedling tray where we'll get them started. They'll grow for a couple of weeks. We'll get to true leaves.
Okay.
And then we'll transplant them up to a larger container that will take them to transplant into our garden. We can start with a small divided container like I have here for seeding, or we can just open seed, but this will kind of be a two-step process.
Okay. Now, will folks have to buy these, or can you substitute these with something else that they may have at home, or what do you think? What's the best way to do that?
Well, one of the best things about getting these is that they're sterile, they're clean.
Okay.
We don't have to worry about bringing in any plant pathogens that might already be in them. Okay. However, if you have something that drains well, you can absolutely start seedlings in them. The nice thing about some of these supplies are that they're sized to fit together well, right? So you can get a seedling starting tray that fits well on a heat mat. So sometimes it's also a sizing issue, but cleanliness and drainage are the most important things as far as selecting containers. Okay. You can also get single-use containers that kind of take out one step. This is a Jiffy peat pellet that expands from this size to this size, and so you can directly seed into this and then take it into the garden without needing that extra transplant step.
Okay. All right. Now, what about media?
Right. So the most important thing about container media is to think about what its purpose is.
Okay.
So its purpose is to both hold water but also drain really well.
Hold water, but drain well.
Right. Yeah, and so it sounds conflicting, but the right materials bring those two factors together really well. Okay. And what we have here is a seed starting mix that has a lot of fine peat moss and just a little bit of small perlite there. And it's designed to be able to keep your seeds moist and get them germinated well. Okay. When we transplant up to a larger size, we'll use a little bit of a larger particle size mix. We can see larger chunks and larger pieces of perlite, and that way we'll get better drainage when we get into larger containers like this. The other great thing about many of these small germination mixes is they have a little bit of fertilizer charge in them.
How about that?
So they get us started off well with a little bit of nutrients.
Okay, so these are readily available. You can find these at any big box store?
Absolutely, box stores, garden centers. In fact, many of these materials I purchased on my drive over last night. So Jiffy pellets are easy to find, germination mixes, and many times these containers, here's one with a small germination dome. Those can be handy for increasing the temperature and the humidity, but you got to be careful. Don't put those in direct sunlight. They will heat up very quickly. So all of these materials are pretty readily available. Good. And then I also have a small heat mat here, which for our peppers and tomatoes, which really like close to 80-degree germination temperatures, many of our watermelons and things like that, it's great even if we're germinating in our house. Keep our house 72, we can keep our heat mat 80 degrees.
That's pretty good. All right, so we talked about temperature. What about air movement? That's important, right?
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the things that trips up early seed starters the most, and that is we keep our media too moist or there's no air movement. And so we want, as the plants are growing, for that germination media to dry out a little bit. We don't want it to dry out completely, but when we water, we want to be able to see that it's drying out a little bit on top, and it's air movement that helps do that. So small fans and interior circulation fans can be really handy. We don't want gale force winds on our young plants, but air movement does help them.
Right.
Yeah, reduce disease and keep the media from staying too moist.
Good points. Yeah. All right, so let's start some seeds.
All right, let's start some seeds.
All right.
So I have a few examples of just some packets. Lots of times they'll come in foil, which is good to keep the humidity low. Depending upon where you buy them and what you buy, sometimes you might find a few seeds that actually have a little bit of fungicide on them. So these are pepper seeds that have a little bit of a fungicide there.
Good.
And that is to support germination, right? If we can keep them from getting too moist and rotting and deteriorating before they come up, that can be an asset. Okay. The other thing that I brought, I'm just going to go ahead and place these here in one of my rows.
So just right on top?
Yeah, so I'll place them right on top, and then most of the time I'll cover, make sure that that they don't get into their neighbor's container, and then I'll just cover lightly. We don't need much cover. Mostly we just want something that keeps our seed universally moist. And tags. Yeah. The other thing that I brought were, so those were pepper seeds that we just planted. These are actually lettuce seeds. Can you tell?
Wow.
Not really, right?
No.
So these are actually pelleted seeds, and for many of our really small seeded crops like lettuce or basil or carrots, pelleted seeds can be a lot easier for us to handle. Okay. And so these can be a large asset. They can also provide some benefits in helping them germinate a little bit more evenly and
there's just one seed in each of those pellets?
There's just one seed in each of these pellets, and what that is a clay material that's just wound around them, kind of think of a big tumbler. It's almost like a washing machine that just thinly coats these, and when they take up water, that seed coat will, it'll either just slough off, or sometimes it'll almost crack like an egg.
Wow.
And they're even organically approved pelleting, so there's lots of different options in pelleting material, and so we can just
Wow, that really helps, because lettuce seeds are so small.
Yeah, they're just easier to handle. There, I'll put a couple in that peat pellet. It has a nice little dibble there in the middle, and then we can just cover these guys up with a light layer of ProMix, and then mist them in, whether with a little spray nozzle or even with a mist nozzle that fits on the end of your hose. You have to be gentle.
Right. Not too much.
Yeah, regular hose strength would
knock them out.
this growing media everywhere.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, so a mist nozzle is great, and then we'll place it on our heating mats, make sure we provide the right temperature, almost 80 degrees for many of our warm season crops, a nice 70 to 75 for some of our lettuce, and in a couple weeks for many of our tomatoes or lettuce, it might be closer to 3 for peppers, we'll be ready to fill our growing tray with a grow mix and transplant these guys up.
Good information. Yeah. Like that demonstration.
Yeah.
Thank you much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please click the subscribe button below.